This is Tuesday, April the 6th. This is the beginning of Russia and the Russian Revolution. Now, this is a relatively short lesson. I anticipate giving some type of a quiz next week, so please be ready for that. Today we're going to look at Russia. And then tomorrow we're going to look at the Russian Revolution and the creation of communism. Now, Karl Marx, who had been an economist in the last part of the 1800s, the 19th century, said that a revolution would occur and that the factory workers would overthrow the factory owners, that the workers would take control of the factory. The workers would then build a perfect community with joint ownership and land for everyone. Now, in Marx's book, The Communist Manifesto, Marx predicted that the first revolution would occur in an industrial country. But the first communist revolution will occur in the early 20th century in an agrarian country of Russia. Now, the Russian Revolution is going to overthrow the Tsar. Most of the aristocracy of Russia is going to be killed off, and a political system designed by Nikolai Lenin will come into play, and this is what we call communism. Now, there are three basic forms of economics: capitalism, socialism, and communism. The Romanov family had ruled Russia the Romanov family began its rule of Russia in the 18th century. That would be the 1700s. The most powerful of the Romanovs was Peter the Great. Now, Peter the Great ruled at about the time of our American Revolution. Peter sees that Russia has a vast supply of natural resources and a large population that could be used for the creation of industry. And it was Peter's dream that the people would give up farming and work in industry. But this modernization of Russia never occurred. The Romanovs did encourage entrepreneurs to invest in Russia, but few ever came. The Romanovs are going to increase the size of the Russian army and the navy, but the weapons that they possessed were never as modern as the weapons from the other parts of the world. During the Napoleonic Wars, during the Crimea Wars, it is obvious that the Russians are behind the times. Following the Boxer Rebellion, that was around 1898, Russia and Japan will begin to fight over Manchuria. Now, Manchuria is land that sits in the northern part of China. The Russo-Japanese War that followed would be fought in two phases. Now, the Russian Navy will be destroyed by the Japanese Navy in the Sea of Japan. But as Russian troops boarded trains to take them to Manchuria, it was obvious to everybody that this war, this land war, was going to be devastating. Both sides agreed to arbitration, and the arbitration occurred in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Both sides believed that the president, Theodore Roosevelt, had given the other side too much. Now, Roosevelt will win the Nobel Prize for Peace because of this action. The Japanese, when they declare war on the United States, this will be one of the reasons why they say they declare war. Now, Tsar Nicholas II, he is the Tsar at the turning point of the 20th century, is going to turn to Sergei Witte. This is Sergei Witte in the picture. And he was in charge of making Russia more industrial. Now, Witt is going to borrow money from foreign countries. Witt is going to raise taxes on Russian landowners. Now, it was under Witt that the Siberian Railroad was completed. Now, the train that would take you from St. Petersburg on the Baltic and Atlantic all the way to Vladivostok on the Pacific makes it easier for the movement of iron ore, makes it easier for the production of steel. But Russia was resistant to Witt's work. They disliked the fact that with this foreign money came foreign suggestions. They preferred the agricultural form of life. Many in Russia were proposing a constitutional monarchy like we have in Great Britain. Others preferred a constitution like they had in France. Now enter Nikolai Lenin. Now Nikolai Lenin is going to call for the overthrow of the Tsar. Lenin and his forces were called Bolsheviks in the Russian language. Lenin preached that there was only one way to take power, and that was through the use of force. Now, because of Lenin's call for an overthrow of the Tsar, Lenin and his Bolsheviks were arrested and they were sent into exile in Siberia. Here's a video about Lenin. After setbacks in Manchuria, a strike is going to spring up in the country. The leaders of the strikes were called Soviets. Now, these strikers, or these Soviets, called for the Tsar to give power to the people. The Tsar agreed, and the Tsar agreed to a parliament which he called a Duma. It's still called a Duma today. The Duma's power was limited, but the Duma did allow a participation of the people. Now, Peter Stolpen succeeded Witt. He preferred to make the peasants supporters of the Tsar. He looked for a political solution where Witt had looked for an economic solution. Now, when Russia entered World War II, the Tsar was attacked by forces loyal to the Austria-Hungarians. The war went quite badly for the Russians. Now, most of the Russian troops were conscripts. That means they were drafted. And the officers were from the aristocracy. They did not mesh well. The soldiers didn't want to fight for the officers, and the officers felt the soldiers were throwing battles. Tsar Nicholas will go to the front to inspect the troops, to try to bring calm. In his absence, he will leave his wife, the Tsarina, Alexandria, in charge. Now, Alexandria had little knowledge of how to run a country, and soon dissent began to take over. Now, Alexandria is going to fall under the spell of this man, Rasputin. Now, Rasputin is a monk. And Rasputin said that he had a cure for one of Alexandria's children who was a hemophiliac. In other words, when he got cut, he just bled and bled and bled and bled. Now, by 1915, this would be the second year of the war, the Russian government was controlled by men who were loyal to Rasputin. And they cared less about the people, they only cared about Rasputin. By March of 1917, various groups opposed to the war overthrew the Tsar. The Duma created a provisional government. Now, one of the first acts of this provisional government was to sign a separate peace treaty with the Central Powers. The Central Powers are going to call for land. The provisional government is going to allow for the independence of Finland. Finland had always been part of the Soviet Union. It's what the provisional government does next that we're going to begin with on Thursday. Now, tomorrow, we're going to write a paper. We're going to write a paper that tells the difference between capitalism, socialism, and communism from a purely economic point of view. We're not going to worry about the politics yet. Okay? So this is where we're going to stop.